That's what's most important right now. Is you not dying on your Smurf blood. Anyway, we are back. We're going to cover our final lesson in Genesis. I done forgot what we called this thing again already, so give me a second. Where did it go?
The dream finally speaks is what we're calling it.
Dream finally speaks. Was that what was said?
Yes.
Okay.
You have it down here.
Dream finally speaks. Hey, look at that. It says bottom screen. Imagine that. So the dream finally speaks. Finishing out Genesis, 42 through the end of the book. So, I guess we'll get rolling on that. Got quite a bit to cover. So, Alex,
a lot of ground to cover. Okay, so we've asked some questions. We've gone through, and last week we kind of asked some questions about like why Joseph doesn't write home, why Jacob doesn't like take the search party out and widen it to find his son. So we'll try to make some connections to that. We'll talk about the sale of Joseph, kind of where the brothers are not technically the ones that sold him. So we'll touch on that really quick. And if I don't get there, Troy, remind me. I don't know that I wrote that part down, but I want to at least make that loop, go back to that really quickly and talk about that. And then we're going to talk about, we're not going to get into the depth of the reconciliation, but we are going to touch on that. And then we're going to set ourselves up for Exodus chapter 1. So a lot of the rest of the book, as you get into it, it's going to have a lot of deep connections right back here to this particular story, the Joseph and his brother story. Throughout the rest of the Bible, you will hear the writers talk about Israel. You'll hear the writers talk about Jacob. You'll hear the writers talk about Ephraim and Manasseh, which are Jacob's sons, that he has Joseph's sons while he has those boys while he's in Egypt. I did want to say, last week I mentioned that the life of Joseph was the end of the Torah. That is not true. That is the end of the book of Genesis. So I wanted to correct that. I did say that last week, and I apologize. Sometimes you get going and you're old. I get old. I'm old. I get old. I'm old, and so sometimes you accidentally say things you didn't mean. So Joseph is the end of Bereshit, Genesis, and then you move into Exodus or Shemot. But all things reference back to a lot of the mitzvot, a lot of the commandments, all reference back to these passages, Jacob, Abraham and Isaac, and even Joseph. And so there's so many. So the points that we didn't get to, and probably some of our viewers are thinking, man, there's so much more to the story. And it is, and I'm glad that you've been reading it, because now you are helping me set up, and I don't have to go back through those intricate details way back there. But as we go through the rest of the Torah, and we get into these journeyings of Israel and the stops that they make and the things that they're dealing with and the people that Moses is writing about, all of those things are intrinsically connected to the life of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so we'll begin to make some of those references, and we'll come back to some of the other things, and even into the New Testament. There are tribes mean something. Tribes always goes back to the 12 sons of Jacob, and really back to the story about Joseph. And there's a lot of important things. So there is a lot of ground to cover. We will not be covering the very last section of the Torah. We're going to just do this in one swing, and then we'll start and we'll talk about starting Exodus another time. So with that being said, that really is going to set us up for that later on Exodus journey, whenever that comes about. So we've walked with Joseph from his dreams to the pit, to the prison, to the palace. But the Torah doesn't end the Joseph story when he rises to power. um, because elevation is not the point. And actually, many people might wonder, what teacher should I listen to? What minister should I sit under? Let me just say this: if the minister is all about elevation and enlightenment and um, the dollar or gain, they're probably not the ministry you want to sit under,
Right.
because their mindset is based solely on your success. Living for Christ is not about being successful, um, and so elevation is not the point. Reconciliation is the point, which is why the Joseph story is so important, especially to people in our time, because more than ever we have influencers, we have ministers, we have YouTube guys, we have all these different people on all these different platforms preaching all this different stuff. And
Yes.
some of it might be great, some of it may not be great, but the point is that if it's all about personal gain and you making a name for yourself, you making an image for yourself, that is the opposite of what the Torah is trying to tell us, because it's not about us. The entire point of the Joseph story is leading us back to this one event that happens way back just after the Exodus from the garden, which is, am I my brother's keeper?
Yeah.
Am I going to be like Abraham and focus on elevating others instead of myself? Because when you do that, you really begin to elevate yourself when you elevate other people. And that's not the case in the United States. Many people are stepping on people. Many people are um, justifying their means by the end. They might say, "Well, I've got a good model here, but it's going to hurt some people. But I'm going to hurt them, and in the end, it'll be better." That's not okay. You cannot do that. So the brothers, God works this thing out with Joseph and his brothers, but the whole point of the story is to help us understand that my success as an individual, our success as individuals, you cannot go in and step on other people and weigh them down and harm them or harm their image based on, my image is going to be better. It's going to be better one day. You can't do that. That's wrong. And so let God be the one to guide you. You be like Joseph, and really Joseph is the guy we all should emulate. We should look up to him, and it's hard being Matt because of the place in which we stand in the nation that we're in, because it's so much easier. Getting ahead is easier when you're destroying other humans, but that's not the case, right?
Right.
And some of that sometimes looks like, I personally know people that ask people for money and then they go have a trip to another country, and it looks like their ministry is exploding, and they're just taking a free trip because somebody else paid for them to go. That's wrong. Uh,
Yes.
and Troy, you know people like that too. But we're not going to get into that. We don't want to say anything bad about people. It's just, if that's the posture of your heart, please change that, because that's not the way that you shouldn't be skating on other people paying for you to go to places or paying for you to have a better life. Um, you know, that's misappropriating funds. So again, the point is not elevation. The point is reconciliation. And today we'll answer the questions that the Torah has essentially been quietly asking us the entire time. So, sorry I went on that rant. So the dream finally comes to pass. Genesis chapter 42. Joseph is now second in command of Pharaoh. He's the controller of grain, and he's the gatekeeper of life and famine. And then Genesis 42:6 says, and I'll do a little bit of Hebrew, but I'm not going to stay there long. V'Yosef hu ha shalit ha al haaretz. So Joseph was the ruler of the land, and the brothers come and they bow. And Genesis 42:6 ends, and it says they bowed before him, faces to the ground. So the dream of Genesis 37 has now become a reality. They're bowing their faces. This is the sheaves of wheat coming down, right?
Right.
Not necessarily symbolically, not necessarily spiritually, but literally. Um, but I want you to notice something important. Joseph does not celebrate this. He knows this dream. He's probably been thinking about these dreams the whole time he's in prison and going through this horrible stuff he's been through. Because the dream coming true is not necessarily the climax. That's not the point. The point was, I've got to save you, and God sent me here to do this one thing.
Yeah.
And Joseph will say that. So why doesn't Joseph reveal himself immediately? This is probably one of the biggest questions people ask. Was Joseph bitter? Was he vengeful? Was he playing games? I think the Torah gives us a clue. Genesis 42:9 says, and Joseph remembered the dreams. Joseph isn't really testing revenge, he's testing repentance.
Yeah.
He wants to know where your heart posture is. And he wants to know really where Judah's heart posture is, because Judah's the one that is the main guy, right?
Right.
But to Joseph, it's all of them, because at this point we're not really sure. We're making a lot of assumptions based on what we're reading narratively, right?
Right.
So um, the um, the idea here is that uh, Joseph doesn't know what Reuben had in his heart. He doesn't exactly know that it was Judah that came up with these things. That's a narrative clue that we get as a reader, but it's not something that they would have known, or Joseph himself would have known. Okay, so in Joseph's mind, everybody hated him, and it's not until this point where he's testing to see where their heart is.
Right.
So he's testing the repentance, right? The dreams weren't just about the power; they were about family alignment. So the question is, have the brothers actually changed? um, so here's one question we asked: why didn't Joseph write home? It's subtle but kind of crucial. Joseph doesn't just live in Egypt. He's been renamed um, uh, regent. He's re-identified. He's assimilated publicly. So he's into this Egyptian lifestyle.
Yeah.
To reveal himself too early endangers his position. It disrupts God's timing and collapses the famine plan. But deeper still, and this is kind of some of the sages ask these questions, but we're asking them as well. Joseph must see whether Judah will step forward, because the wound that broke the family comes from the brothers who would not um, protect him, and healing must come from brothers who will.
Yeah.
So, in Joseph's mind, he's essentially wondering, did they even love me? Dad sent me down to Dothan to check on the brothers, and when I go down there, that's when I get captured. And then I get thrown into this pit, and on Joseph's viewpoint, there's a lot of things he doesn't know contextually per the text. So he doesn't know which one is selling him. He doesn't know what all of the brothers are thinking.
Right.
While he's in that pit, Joseph just thinks, this is the worst day of my life. I'm in this pit now. And now all of a sudden the rope comes down and he climbs out that rope, and it's the Midianites. And they're like, wait a minute, they sold me into slavery. So
Yes.
from if you're looking at, this is a great way to a great way to, I'm trying to do the two words at once. It's a great way to read the text
Yeah.
when you look at each individual's perspective from the text. So let's look at Joseph first. Let's then look at the brothers. Let's then look at Jacob. Let's then look at Rachel and Leah. When we begin to read the text like that, we're seeing the multiple sides of the diamond. It's the same story, it's the same diamond, but you're seeing something different in every angle. So um, it, that kind of goes along with this next question: why didn't Jacob search for Joseph? And this question really, in my mind, haunts the entire story. But Jacob is mourning and does not pursue. Why? In my mind, I'm thinking because Jacob's he believes that Joseph is dead. Genesis
Yes.
37:35 says, I will go down to my son mourning to Sheol," means mourning to the grave. Jacob does not investigate Egypt because he has accepted the lie. And this matters thematically because Jacob once deceived his father with a garment. Now Jacob is deceived with a garment, measure for measure. And this is how we read
Ah,
the scripture, right?
I
We want,
see.
yeah, we want to see there's garments back here and there's garments here. So it's the question of where have I heard this before, right?
Right.
And that again is going to continue to happen throughout the Torah narrative, and into the rest of the Tanakh and the Brit Hadashah. The Tanakh is the Old Testament, Brit Hadashah is the New Testament. Um, so these things are important, and it's measure for measure. So here's the turning point. Judah steps forward in Genesis 44. Everything changes when Benjamin is threatened. Judah finally speaks up. And again, maybe in the next go around, we can really talk about the Judah and Tamar story because that has a lot of connections with us as well.
Yeah.
We got into it just briefly here now, but we will be we can definitely go back to that. And there's more to hit on that. But Genesis 44:33 says, "Please let your servant remain instead of the lad." This is Judah talking now.
Yeah.
This is a reversal of the beginning. Years ago, Joseph suggests killing, no, maybe not killing, let's sell him. He suggests selling Joseph. Now, Judah is offering himself. So there's a change in his mind, right?
Right.
He's no longer about saving his own skin and taking care of himself. He's about taking care of the younger brother, which is not who Joseph was prior. The family is healed here, not later. So then at that point, Joseph almost cannot take it anymore. He just can't hold in the tears. And he says, Ani Yosef, Ha'oved Avichai. I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? Ha'oved Avichai. Um, he doesn't ask about revenge. He doesn't ask about Egypt. He asks about his father. The broken family line is finally restored. So, and then, there's this dialogue that happens. The Torah said that he talked to his brothers. His brothers and him conversated, which is a whole thing. We'll get to that later. Genesis 45:5. He says, "For God sent me ahead of you to preserve life." So the point of the sale, the point of all this thing happening, I thought it was a detriment to me. I thought you hated me. I thought you didn't like me. But the whole point is what you meant for evil, God made for good. And this
Yes.
thing, he finally figured out, hey, this is what's right. Um, I'm trying to figure out whether my dog is chewing on my chair right now and doing this at the same time because my wife left, so he's probably upset. Joseph doesn't deny their sin, but he places it inside of a larger sovereignty.
Yeah.
And this is the Torah theology at its finest. Really, these things are just phenomenal. And while I'm here talking about this connection between Joseph and the brothers, at the very beginning of this, Joseph and Reuben have this kind of conversation where Joseph says, "You're spies," which is a play on for what's coming in the next portion of the Torah, which is the book of Exodus and really the journeyings of Israel, because there's some spies that come up, and there's a Hebrew word there that really will resonate with those of us who believe in Yeshua as the one true God. We'll talk about that later, but I want to put that little nugget in your brain right now. But he calls them spies, and he says, "You've come to spy out the land." And Reuben then turns to the brothers and he says, "See, I told you, if we didn't hear his voice down in the pit, we chose not to listen, and therefore his blood is upon us, or his blood is required for us," or something along those lines. And we really went through that kind of at the last earlier in the season here. But it all comes together here at this point because Joseph begins to understand, oh, they didn't sell me. They didn't listen. And so by the time Reuben gets back to the pit, if you go back to read that narrative again, he's ripping his clothes. Why in the world would Reuben rip his clothes if he was selling Joseph into slavery? Wouldn't he know that, oh man, we sold him? Like, I'm not going to be upset about this.
Yeah.
But the point is that Reuben had this mind, he had this idea in his own mind that, sure, let's sell him into slavery. And what happened was, as Reuben was going to return to the pit, grab the lad up and take him back to his dad. But he's too late because the Midianite travelers passed by. They saw him down there, saw the opportunity to sell this guy to the Ishmaelites, and that's exactly what they did. And because they didn't hear Joseph's cry, what ended up happening is they, alongside these individuals who sold him, you can begin to see that playing out. They feel remorse for not hearing him, not remorse for selling him into slavery. And, if you actually were the one selling him, then, Reuben's language probably would have sounded like, "I told you we shouldn't have sold him, but you guys wouldn't listen."
Yep.
That's not what Reuben says. And so there's an ancient sage that kind of makes that, but we're also making that, we're asking the same questions that he's asking. So um, the family comes together in Egypt, and that kind of hopefully that last part that I just talked about, hopefully that kind of resonates with some people, gets some answers clear, gives some clarity of how they are in trouble for selling him, but they are not totally in trouble for selling him. And it's a dual faceted thing, and that also connects back to, the Genesis story of um, Cain and Abel. Okay, so finally, the family comes together in Egypt. Joseph becomes, he comes down. I'm sorry, Jacob comes down into Egypt. 70 souls enter Egypt, and this is really the inception of the story of Exodus. Um, so Genesis 46:3 says, "Do not fear going down to Egypt." But why? Because for right now, Egypt is a refuge before slavery, and it's a womb before nationhood, which again sets us up for Exodus. Um, so the Joseph story comes to an end, but the Torah does not.
Right.
And this is Exodus chapter 1, verse 8. Again, we'll kind of rescan this when we start the Exodus thing up. But essentially in English, it says a new king arose over Egypt. Joseph brought Israel in, and Moses will take Israel out. Dreams brought them down. The covenant will bring them up.
Yes.
So it gives us a good setup of what's to come. Um, Joseph and the brothers are there. They have a great life. But this new king that rises kind of forgets all of the things that happened to Joseph. And I want you to put this also in your brain because we'll cover this later, is that there are writings about Joseph in Egypt in Pharaoh's hands. That he can actually, this new Pharaoh that is coming, he can look at these transcripts and see Joseph and see the God of Israel and seeing all these things that Joseph did for Israel and how he's prince regent and he's second in command and all these things and the brothers coming down and it's all there because Joseph would have put it there. He's second in command. Why wouldn't he? And so again, our our viewers that are super awesome towards us, they could say, well, I don't agree with that because there's no biblical knowledge of that. And that's right. There isn't. Again, it's assumptive. You're asking these questions that might be, what did he think he was doing, type of stuff.
Yeah.
Can we make? And again, if you go into the Talmud, I wouldn't recommend new believers going to the Talmud just yet, but you can go to the Talmud, and there are some things that happen there, and we can get there at another time. But on the surface level, we're just really doing the Peshat level of things, the surface level, and it really would make sense that Joseph would have had some type of, textual knowledge of him and the things that he did for the land of Egypt.
Yeah. So because they were writing things down at that point in time.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So
And think this really isn't too far off of modern history, right? Abraham happens, I believe, and I know somebody will count me on this, but Abraham happens, I think, somewhere at the time of the building of the Wall of China. So it's not very, very far away. There's like 1,000 generations between um, Abraham and Adam, I believe. So I think you've got 6,000 years of history before now. So these people that come out and they say, well, the earth is millions of years old, there's a lot of Christian scientists don't agree with that. They don't agree. A lot of the sages and rabbis will argue we've only been here 6,000 years. So a lot has taken place in the last 6,000 years of our history, from the time of the beginning of the garden to Abraham, and Abraham also probably would have been around during Jacob's time. So Jacob would have had conversations with Abraham. So would have Isaac. Even the brothers probably have met Abraham at some point in their life. So there's a lot of things that, again, this is why studying the word is so important. You don't want to just take some guy's word for this. Don't take my word for this, guys. Look it up in the book. Ask the questions. Let's dig in the word. Let's find out, what does the word of God mean, and how is God leading me into the life that he's called me to be in. So Joseph teaches us this. What looks like delay is often design. What feels like silence may be preparation, and God does not waste betrayal. He redeems it. So next week we will begin in Exodus, and I thought this was going to be a little bit longer, but I actually didn't. I didn't go too crazy today, which was pretty good.
Nope. But no, you didn't.
Yeah.
So questions that I have already before we get there.
Yep.
You just said we'll go 70 people went into Egypt. Are you going to cover how many people come out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
The number is multiplied greatly. I didn't remember that much. I don't remember what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Second, you only because you brought it up. Not Great Wall of China. It is probably something else.
Oh, what? Yeah, I don't know.
Because, well, if you look at the way it's made and the way the lookouts are, the lookouts face into China, not away from China.
Hmm. Oh, so you don't think the Chinese actually built it?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, I've never heard that.
Look. So yeah, you can just Google that. Who built the Great Wall of China, and that will probably come up.
Yeah, I definitely will. I've never. So, again, some of these things, these questions we're asking ourselves, it's not just good for the Torah; it's good for life. Let's ask: does this make sense? What's the who, what, when, where, why, and how? And that's really the beginning level of this thing, is asking the who, what, when, why, where, and how. The deeper you get, the more questions begin to surface, and you wonder, I don't know. I'm finding things aren't always the way that we've always been taught. Here's what we do know, and this is disheartening for people who believe in leaders and people who believe in presidents and in kings and in great authoritative figures. Each time there is a setup of a new government somewhere, information is hidden or lost because it's not beneficial that this particular information. Is that what they're calling it? Tartaria?
Tartaria.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about that before.
I have never once talked about this.
Really? Somebody brought it up to me before. I don't know. There's many people that talk to me. Anyway,
yes.
The point of this is every time there, and you can see this. You don't need biblically to see this. You can see this in history. The Romans did this, the Nazis did this, the Assyrians do this, the Babylonians do this. They destroy what is not good for their kingdom, right. And that king essentially hides or destroys things, and then new things are built up. And so we're just now, this one day after the Christmas. The Christmas narrative is there's these guys, we call them wise men. Typically, most churches will argue that there's 3 of them. There's actually probably more. But these people are from Persia, and they call them magi in some of the biblical narratives, depending on what translation you're reading. Well, those magi come from a specific place. They come from Persia. And guess who ruled in Persia? Queen Esther ruled in Persia. And you guessed it, one of the big ones that a lot of people are talking about right now is Daniel. Daniel also ruled in Persia, and Daniel has dreams. I wonder, where have we heard a ruler having dreams before? Oh yeah, this is the Joseph story. This is why these things connect, because Daniel's dream gives these wise men the key to who it is that they're looking for when they go into the land of Canaan or Canaan. And they see this baby that is born. He's actually probably the age of 2. It was not when he first got there. And, the angels come back to him. We have angels coming to the guys, and they're leaving a different way. These are the same themes. It all connects right back to the Joseph story. And this is really how the Torah is wanting you to read the narrative. All of these Jewish writers, it's Jewish poetry. This is the way this works. They're making these connections, and these stories are, because time is not linear, it's seen as cyclical, it's spiraling, it's always repeating itself. So, and you can see this right now. Our nation is going through a time of repeating itself. We've talked about this in other podcasts. This really, sets us up for understanding the world that we're living in. And it really begins to set us up for understanding the end of the age, which is the big time questions, which is stuff that we've covered multiplicity of things in our podcast about the end of the age. And so to understand these things, you've got to go back to the beginning. You have to understand the Jacob, the Joseph, and the Moses narratives and Abraham and so on, because these dreamers always show up. Joseph, the father of Jesus, was a dreamer. You know, Daniel was a dreamer. There's many people who have dreams. Anytime they have a dream, it always connects back to Yosef or Joseph, who is the king of dreams. Um, and we go back to that narrative and we look at those things and we make these connections based on that. And yes, the father of Jesus being named Joseph is very important because the Messiah, the Savior, the Redeemer, um, comes after Joseph. So Moses is that Redeemer, and he's the foreshadow of Messiah because he himself says there's someone greater than I that's coming. Okay, so that's a whole lot of information. Good question, though. Great questions. And we will have to dig into the Great Wall of Tartara. Is that how you say it? Tartaria?
Tartaria, yes.
Yeah.
So just for you, so you have the Great Wall of Tartaria. Also, look into the Russian flag symbol
Mm.
because allegedly it is the symbol of a man on a horse trampling the symbol of Tartaria.
I thought it was a bear.
No, that is what the Bible refers to them as, but yes, their flag is not actually a bear.
Mm. Well, there you go. I'm
Yeah.
learning something. That's good.
Yeah, so that's what they say is their flag symbol shows that guy on a horse in the middle of it, and it's trampling something.
It's like the Great Wall. Wow.
So
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is that these apostles and disciples, they do go far out that way.
yep.
They make it to Nepal. I want to say Thomas is one of the ones that ends up way over there. Um,
And if you allegedly, I've also heard there's stories of a man named Jesus making it that far as well. Because it does talk about how there's a space of time where Jesus is not accounted for.
yeah.
So there's rumors that he was traveling lots of other places.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've heard that. Well, there's a lot of people that also wonder if he made it to Spain. Spain had a major Jewish following in the 13, 12, 11, 12, 1300s. By the 14 and 1500s, this is Columbus. I think 1400s is when Columbus starts his expeditions towards the New World.
Yep.
And a lot of the fleeing of the Jewish nation comes out of Spain and goes to the Americas. Um, so a lot of the things that the forefathers built was based on biblical ideology, Jewish ideology, and in some ways, there was a lot that's not. A lot of our nation symbols are not Jewish at all.
Yeah.
Some of them are very pagan, but it's intrinsically all connected. And one of the we celebrate the 4th of July. Sometimes the 9th of Av, which is a celebration. It's not really a celebration, it's more of a day of fasting and mourning, but they mourn the destruction of the temple. But usually the 4th and the 9th of Av are pretty darn close, or they come in contact with each other every so many years. So it's how the Jewish calendar aligns with our Gregorian calendar. These holidays sometimes butt each other, and again, like sometimes Hanukkah and Christmas fall in the same line, and then sometimes it's a couple weeks before or a couple weeks after or whatever. And so it's interesting because the Jewish calendar is lunar and our calendar is solar. And so these are things, again, there's a lot of hidden, there's many different hidden things that happen during the Dark Ages and during the Crusades, and the history just kind of gets wild. I've been doing some very deep dives on the apostolic history in the in the Dark Ages and where it went and where tongues are actually found in the Dark Ages, and they are there.
Interesting.
Yep, very. So there's a lot of things, but again, most of these themes you will see always connect back to these stories that we're covering now, and that's really the big. That's really the big. The huge takeaway is that nothing, and Ecclesiastes talks about this. There's nothing new under the sun. Everything is repeating, always repeating. History itself is repeating. Um, and we did a I'll real quick say this because I know we got to go. But we did a podcast on the Shemitah and the
Yep.
law of the Shemitah. You remember that?
I do. The shorts and some of those things are still getting views here and there, so people are looking at that information.
Yep. The Shemitah has so much more to do with the biblical narrative and the things that went on in the Torah. So understanding the Shemitah on a different level is just it's mind blowing because then the Shemitah is the great way to understand what we're studying now and why it matters. Because you probably have a viewer out there saying, why the heck does this junk matter? It does matter. And the reason why it matters is because it's important for us as believers, at least those of us who are believers. If you're not a believer and you're watching, praise God. Um, but it does matter to us because it affects us in our modern time. It affects the stock market. It affects that's probably my dog's flappy ears you're listening to.
That's exactly what it sounded like.
Yeah, it's not a helicopter. But all these things are connected into the Shemitah, and the Shemitah is essentially like a world clock almost, and you're watching things happen in real time in our events, including 9/11, which is a very major, close event that's happened to most of us. Most of our listeners will understand that 9/11 happens during a Shemitah year. In fact, the 29th of Elul happens, I think, right before or right after the 9/11 attacks, and there's so many things nowadays that are connected back to those attacks. So, um, you know, all these things, and I even would argue those people that want to do a deep dive into uh, the Revelation narrative, the horses and the colors of the horses, they represent flags and they represent colors on a particular flag that is in consistent conflict with the nation of Israel. And so these are the things that John sees and he writes about, and there's a whole bunch of stuff there, but it's just really cool to be able to see this stuff. But when you study the Torah in this way, it really opens your mind and worldview to the rest of what it is that we're actually looking at. And going into the book of Exodus is a perfect time to talk about the end of the age. So we might drop some Easter eggs about the end of the age with the book of Exodus because I am going to try to go do my own study on that, and I'll drop a little bit of Easter eggs on that for kind of how I personally view the end of the age. And some of it will be biblical and some of it will be my own ideology. And that's just unfortunately how things go because that's what ministers do.
Right.
And I'm not the only guy out here doing it. So if you get mad at me, you ain't going to listen to nobody else that's not doing it either. So bing bong in your face. I don't know how to say that. Everybody does that. There's going to be a little bit of me inside of the sermon. There's going to be a little bit of whatever ministry you're listening to inside of the sermon that you're listening to. So
Yep.
I'm just giving you that heads up for those people that think that their minister only preaches God's word and God's word alone. They're just as much involved in it, and they're not perfect either. None of us are.
I mean, ideally, you try to keep as much of yourself out of it as you can, but yes, you will influence the message for sure.
Yeah.
Try to get more of what God's wanting to say and less of what you're wanting to say. But yes, you cannot help it. You are human. You will interject your own thoughts into it.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's Moses interjected himself into the narrative of the Torah,
Yeah.
And Yeshua did the same thing, and these other ministers do the same thing. So this has been going on for thousands of years.
Right.
From Abraham all the way down. So, okay, I know you got to go. We're at 40 minutes.
Yep.
And I have more to be at 6 p.m. So I'm glad we got on here.
I have kids staring at me on the staircase right now wanting food. So,
dang it. What are you eating? Can I have some?
Pizza. Come on over.
If it wasn't a 2-hour drive, I would. So we're going to figure out another time to do the next segment and we're going to look at how things have gone with this one. Please comment. Please ask questions. We will get to those questions, and even if it's a Genesis question, to ask. So I'm actively sending these to people, hoping that they ask questions, but they still haven't done
Right.
it. So if
Nope.
you have not asked a question, I'm calling you out. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Even if it's why you wear a Bigfoot T-shirt, I may answer that one.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you like the answer. Anyway, I love you. It's been a blessing, and I'm glad we get to do these things. I got to
Me
take these
too.
dogs.
Sounds like it. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for watching. Have a great one. See you next time.
See you guys.